Hello, this is Phil Gibbs from OpenMake Software and welcome to another episode in the series entitled How to Do Cool Things with DeployHub. And in this episode we're going to be looking at the domain model and how the domain model in DeployHub encourages component sharing and reuse while still allowing teams to exist in their own walled garden, working in isolation from each other so that individual teams don't get under each other's feet. So in order to demonstrate this, we have a domain model that's set up like this. We have OpenMake, the organization, at the top level domain, and that's broken into two geographic regions. We have our UK domain and our USA domain. And if I were to open up the UK domain, you can see that we have 4 projects working inside the UK. There's our deployment engine for DeployHub, project director, RTI and Trilogy, and the USA team have 2 subdomains of DeployHub web user interface and the Meister build engine. Now that means that if the UK team is isolated from the USA team, I've logged in as the OpenMake user, so I can see both subdomains. So I can look at the life cycle that each project team is using, and you can see that we can have different life cycles and different routes alive for each team. So, you know, DeployHub deployment engine has a different life cycle to that for project director. Every object in DeployHub has its own domain, applications, environments. So we've got an application here. We've got the engine application, and we have a project director application there, for example. And those applications can be versioned and move through the life cycle. Now, the applications are made up out of components, and if I have a look at the Components tab and expand that, you can see that we have a single a shared component, which is Java Runtime version 8, and that is defined at the OpenMake level. What this means is that both the UK domains and the USA domains can see that component. Right? There are other components. So the USA team has a component called USA license, and that is in the USA domain, so only the USA team can see that. The UK team, on the other hand, has a component called UK license, which will be spelt differently and have a few other different terms and conditions, and that's only available to the UK team. So let me show you how that works in practice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to log out of the OpenMake user, who can see both of those domains. And what I'm going to do now is just log in as a UK user. Now you can see when that happens, I can see I can only see my UK domain. I cannot see any of the USA domains or the OpenMake domains. So all I can see is the teams that are under control of the UK. So in this case, I can see my deployment engine, my project director, and Trilogy. If I were to look at the engine application now, what I can do is I can build up the engine up out of the components that I have. And these components are local to my deployment engine. So what I can do is I can create an application by dragging in plugins. I can drag in my API, plug in the listener. And that allows me to build up this application. You notice because I only have access to the UK domain, I can't drag in any of the USA's components onto my application engine. All I can do is drag in the components that are designed to the UK. However, you'll notice that there is a global components field here, and if I were to highlight and expand that, you can see there's the Java Runtime version 8. That was defined at the OpenMake level. And so this is available to me in the UK. I can use anything that's defined above my domain, any component that's defined above my home domain, I can use and drag on. So I can take this Java Runtime and I can add that into my application. Similarly, if I were to, let me add I'll add the UK license as well, just to be on the safe side. Now let me log out of there and log in as a US based person. And here you can see that we've now, our USA is the home domain, and I can only see DeployHub, Web UI, and Meister. So let us have a look at our web interface code here. And you can see again that we've only got access to our domains. But Java Runtime V8, because that was defined at the OpenMake level, is now available to me to drag and drop as an application component onto my application. So I can now build my application up here from the database schema and the WAR file, and I can also drag in my USA based license. I don't have access to the UK license, so I can't accidentally drag in the long licensing mechanism for the USA domain. Now that allows me to work in isolation, so the USA team can work in isolation with its components. The UK team can work in isolation with its components, and you'll notice though that we can also share the Java runtime because that's defined at a higher level and it's a shareable object. Now let me log back in as the OpenMake user again and just show you. So now that component, you'll recall, where the Java runtime was defined at this OpenMake level. Let us imagine then that the USA team have got this secure socket library that they're using, and they want the UK to be able to share it. Right? So now we've got a situation where the UK want to use the secure sockets, and the decision is made at the sort of OpenMake corporate level that both the UK and the USA should be using the same libraries. So we're going to take that and we're going to make that available to the UK. So in order to do that, all I have to do is to take that component and just drag it to my OpenMake level. And you'll notice now that at the OpenMake level, I've now got the SSL libraries. So if I now log back in now as a UK person, I'll go back to my deployment engine and look at my assigned components. I've now got the SSL libraries available to me now on, and add those in as a shared component. So it's very easy to move things in and out of scope for individual teams just by dragging and dropping it on through that domain hierarchy. You'll notice that we've been traditionally here logging in and logging out as geographic users. So a UK user and a USA user. What I can do is to drill down still further, and I can put users into individual development teams. So in this case, I've got a user. What I have is just at the DeployHub deployment engine domain. So I am now a developer purely in the DeployHub deployment engine, and I can still see all of the components, but I'm isolated now into my individual team. So I cannot see the other applications that are part of this geographic region. I am basically a developer working purely in the DeployHub deployment engine team, and therefore I cannot see anything outside of that team. But I can still, of course, share those components. So you'll see, I have access to the UK license now as a global component. The UK license has moved to be a global component because it's defined at the UK level, not at the DeployHub deployment engine level. So this is now still available to me as a draggable component, but it is actually defined at the UK level, not my team level. So everything that you define in any domain as a component is available to domains beneath that domain in the domain hierarchy, assuming that you have permission to use it. And so that allows teams to share components that should be shared. So common runtime components that are shared across the entire estate, but teams can still work in isolation from each other and still work only with the components that they're interested in. I hope you found that interesting. That's a unique feature to DeployHub, the domain hierarchy, and it makes for a very powerful enterprise tool because it means that teams can work in isolation while still sharing what they need to share in order to be productive. And it encourages the reuse of components between teams. Hope you found that interesting. Thank you very much, and goodbye.